All right, I think that's enough time. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining me on this Friday. I know there's some other things going on today as well in the world of water, specifically the DWR briefing about the March 1st snow survey. Of course, that's why I also picked today, because we're going to discuss some of those numbers too. But I am Dr. Andrew Schwartz. I'm the director at the UC Berkeley Central Sierra Snow Lab here. And we're going to go over some various things as far as California's water supply and snowpack and how that's looking right now, as well as the Western U.S. and the upcoming forecast. And as we approach April 1st, these numbers are vitally important. They're not quite as important as April 1st, but they are still incredibly important as we get closer to what we consider our peak snowpack season. Some housekeeping things first. Everyone's on mute with their video shut off. That's just to make things a little bit easier as we go through the meeting. I will unmute everyone when it comes time for questions. If you think of questions as I'm going through things, feel free to put them in the chat, and I will go back to reference those as we move forward. I let me say that again. Put them in the chat, and I'll go back and answer those at the end of the presentation. So to start, let me get over to my window here. Going to come here, guy. Share my screen. We've got our web page loading here. So we have come off of a relatively good February as far as our snowfall and snowpack conditions are concerned. We had that long period in January without much going on that really put us behind, and the beginning of February helped bulk us up. Website's loading slow. I can only imagine because we're on this call. But it has been a very warm week. And we have seen these numbers on the right-hand side of the screen slowly shrinking. Part of that's because we're not getting additional precipitation. Some of that's also because we are losing a little bit of snow water equivalent. So in the last week, we haven't had any snow. What we have had is what you can see in that current temperature box, and that's very warm temperatures. We've been in the upper 40s or 50s realistically for the last 5 days or so, and it's doing a number on the snowpack. Now, something that's interesting is that if we look at our snow water equivalent, even though it is decreasing a little bit, it's not decreasing much compared to the period at the end of January. This is a similar warm, dry period at the end of January, but we're not seeing the same level of decrease. We are getting overnight temperatures that are below freezing. And so we believe that the freezing temperatures overnight are kind of working to reset the snowpack. And so it hasn't become what we would define as ripe quite yet. And that's a good thing. We want this snow and its water to stick around as long as possible. So those overnight freezing temperatures have been really nice to have up here at the higher elevations. On the right, you can see where we're at in overall precipitation and snow for the season. We are at 106% of median to date for our overall precipitation, which includes both rain and snow, which is a little confusing when you look at these other numbers, specifically the median snow water equivalent to date and median snowfall to date, both being around 90 to 91%. And that's primarily because we have had an anomalously warm winter, as is proof of our current temperature as well. We've had a lot of rain on snow events, and that's created a little bit of problem in building our snowpack. Realistically speaking, any precipitation is good, but when we're at 106% of median precipitation to date, we really want to be in a situation where we're at or above average in our snowpack. And we are at 90%. We're still pretty good. But this is when we start to become a little bit concerned with early melt off. The water's there, But if we have early melt, then that can really cause issues as far as our ecosystems are concerned and gives us extra time for our fuels to dry as we go into summer and the fire season. So overall, we'd like to see those numbers, those 90s boosted a little bit more on the right-hand side of the page, but um, we're not looking too bad. Uh, if we look at what's happening outside right now, like I said, very warm. We're mid 50s right now in February, which is absolutely ridiculous. Winds are low, but so is our relative humidity, which means we're probably getting some evaporation off of the snowpack as well. We are starting to see a pulse up on this bottom right plot in our soil moisture. And that is a little concerning, as that typically means that we're starting to see more meltwater come out of the bottom of the snowpack. So we're seeing that pulse up in our soil moisture. No real response in the stream flows yet, which is a good thing in terms of keeping our snowpack around. As far as what things look like with our regional snowfall analysis, the heaviest snowfall still has been up to the northern part of the state. And in the Central Sierra down south, still plenty of snow, but on the lighter side of things compared to the other two regions. One thing I do want to point out that I don't typically look at during these briefings is our climatology. And we're coming off of realistically a massive year 2 years ago, and but slightly above average year last year, and it's looking like we're going to be around average again. And I'm just pointing out here, this is not super common. We don't have these periods where we have 3 years in a row where we have good precipitation on a regular basis. There's only a handful in the last 40 or 50 years realistically. So a good time to really reflect and welcome how much precipitation we've had and the bounty of snowpack as well. So moving on to our conditions around the state, our snowpack is not divided equally. Of course, it never really is, but we're really seeing what could be described as a stereotypical La Nina pattern. I always hesitate to use things like typical La Nina and El Nino because we have a lot of complicating factors to those year in, year out. And there's been a recent paper released that really just shows there's some issues when trying to use La Nina or El Nino when talking about precipitation and snowfall throughout California. But this is what our current situation looks like. And again, more looking like a typical La Nina. We have extra precipitation up in Northern California, that 104% of average for our snowpack up there. And then as we go south, it becomes less and less, with the Southern Sierra only having 70% of their average snowpack to date. So again, we're at 85% statewide. That's pretty good. We could be in a lot worse shape for where we're at. So by no means are we in an emergency situation or anything like that. We'd just like to see those numbers bulk up, of course, to give us an average snowpack, because when we have additional water, we get to make some really nice water allocations and get those out to the people that want them. If we go back a week and look at the 21st, we were at 91%. We have fallen off. It has been a dry week. It's been a warm week as well. So the decrease in normal percentage for the date is likely due to a couple different things. One, we didn't get precipitation in the last week when it is fairly common this time of year. And two, we are having that melt statewide. It has been very, very warm. So of course, the big news right now is all the different snow courses, about 260 of them around the state, are being measured. This is where, if you are interested in looking at that data, you can go. So go to cdec.water.ca.gov. You can click on snow and then come down to this monthly snow course measurements and click on latest. And this is what it looks like. So fields that are populated by numbers have already been measured. Fields that are populated by a scheduled for means that they need to be measured still. But generally speaking, as we scroll through this, we can see the vast majority have been measured and match for the most part, our map on the previous page. Um, this map that I like to show that says 91% of normal for this date. Um, this map is created using the statewide monitoring network. So these are automated stations that are being fed into this. Whereas our snow courses are, sometimes going back over 100 years at this point and are done by sending people out into the field like Andy Reesing and his crew are doing today and doing the measurements with the federal samplers by hand. So you'll see we still have a lot of discrepancy between the northern part of the state and the southern parts as we look at the different regions. We do have 124% up north. As we start to go south, we start to see that fall a little bit. But overall, 83% of average throughout the state for March, and 73% of what we would hope for our April 1st average. So still looking pretty good. But again, 83% here, 90, excuse me, not 91%. That was from last week. 85% here. Very close, a little bit off, but we're waiting for those other snow courses to come in. Of course, if we look at this in terms of what we're expecting over time, we are sitting here at the beginning of March. April is typically when we peak, so we do have a little ways to go. Up north, still looking pretty good as far as potentially hitting our average for April 1st. However, central, south, we've got a longer way to go. That being said, the forecast is looking somewhat favorable for additional precipitation, which is always a good thing. So we'll just see where we'll end up. We're not in a particularly bad spot. I think at this stage of the game, as far as where we are at in regards to April 1st averages, which is these blue numbers next to the thick blue line, we could go a long way down south, especially as we approach the warmer months. So not in terrible shape, but we'd like to see more. Despite some interesting choices for water releases made a while back, our reservoir numbers are in extremely good condition. We are above historical averages on basically all of them, minus one or two here and there. So our water storage is looking extremely good, and we still have plenty of water up here in our snowpack with more storms coming in. So looking like we'll stay in a pretty good condition moving forward overall for our water storage here in California. If we zoom out to the western part of the states, we can see, again, still those kind of issues. We've got more blue dots, which are, above 100% of average or so, up in these northern parts of California, southern parts of Oregon. But we do have quite a few areas where we have good conditions. So ideally, we want, these dots to be green or blue. And we see that a lot in the Rockies. We see that throughout, even the Northern Rockies, which is good because they were kind of lagging a little bit last year at the same time. And we are starting to see, some clear patterns emerge as far as issues with our snow water content, which is what all these dots represent. Here down around the southern portions of Colorado, Utah, Arizona is definitely hurting for some additional snowfall. And we see the occasional station up here in the north too. So want to get away from those reds and into blues, but overall not looking too bad throughout the western United States. If we look at the basin conditions, which are, it always takes a minute to load. There we go. Instead of the individual stations, if we look at the basin conditions, it paints a little bit more of a complete picture. And again, not looking too bad throughout the western U.S. As we get further east, it becomes an issue here in Wyoming. Down south is realistically where we have the largest lack of moisture. Southern California into Arizona, and Colorado, New Mexico. That's where we need moisture right now. We do have a little bit of a decrease in moisture up here along the Canadian border, where we have these catchments at 70 to 80%, but that's still, as far as things go, relatively good to say 17%. And so we're looking quite good throughout the Western US at this point in time. So onto the forecast. We do see a couple opportunities coming up. Just want to be happy. There we go. We do have a couple opportunities coming up for storms to impact the Western US, particularly California and the Sierra Nevada. This being the first that is coming through on Sunday and looks to bring some decent moisture to the entirety of the Sierra Nevada before heading further inland. As we move past that, we do see a little bit of moisture hang out on Monday, some snow. And then as we move forward, we see some bands of rain, that green moving in on the left, and then some more potential snow showers up north. When this gets relatively interesting is as we approach, I'm going to fast forward here a little bit quickly, but when we approach approximately 10 days out, which is realistically when I stopped trusting these models, but there we go. We start to see the system moving forward around the 10th. That looks like it could be relatively significant for us. Again, another, atmospheric river, not the best orientation, kind of coming more so south to north, which doesn't always give us the biggest dumps of snow because it's less parallel to the Sierra Nevada than if it was at about a 45-degree angle here. But another sign that we might be getting, consistent storm systems in March. So the nice thing about this is that if we look at the European model, we see some agreement here in that. I'm not counting chickens before they've hatched, so to speak, as far as precipitation totals. The European model shows this as being a lot more of an intense system, which you guys can see here. Those purples in the middle of the screen here, those are really high snowfall rates. Anything that's yellow or orange is a heavy rainfall rate. So the European model showing us some pretty intense precipitation, but again, being 10 days out, we're just more looking at the pattern and the likelihood that there will be a storm, not necessarily the actual quantities coming from it. So if we change what we're plotting up here away from precipitation type and instead look at our snowfall totals, I'm going to zoom in for this one. Actually, went too far forward. I'm going to zoom in a little bit to just show the lab. There we go. So through this weekend and into Monday, we do have a little bit of snow. Totals are looking at about 5 to 10 inches here in the Central Sierra around the snow lab. And then down south a little bit more, which again is good because that's when where we need it the most realistically is down in the Central and Southern Sierra. So 5 to 10 inches for us, and this is pretty consistent throughout the models right now. There's one, the National Weather Service, NBM, or National Blended Models, which has showed some reduction in what those totals could be, looking like it could be 1 to 3 inches based off that. But I'm not ready to call it quits just yet on the bigger totals, as that one seems to be the outlier for the time being. Looking at this data in a slightly different way, these are plots from our friends at the University of Utah. These are a little bit hard to read if you're not used to it, but basically what we're looking at is on the top left, this is accumulated precipitation in inches on the y-axis, and then over time on the x-axis. And then these are different, what we call ensemble members or different model runs. And then the average of those model runs to try to give us an indication of the average of where everything's coming in at. Accumulated precip is interesting. Of course, here at the Snow Lab, we're more interested in this right plot, which is accumulated snow in inches. So we can see coming up into this weekend, that first storm and into Monday, looks like, yeah, we're averaging out again to around 7, 8, maybe 9 inches. lower range of that being probably 6 inches right now. Um, as we move into later in the week, it does look like there's the chance for another small snowfall event here around the 6th of March and into the 7th of March, which could bring our weekly total up to around 10 to 15 inches before, again, that next system could potentially come in the following weekend. Something to note about these plots here is 00Z is 0 UTC time, or in Britain, which means these times are 4 p.m. So you can see, roughly the time that these things would start. So 12Z, 4 a.m. starting on Sunday is when the precip's really going to start for us up here. The other thing I like to point out here, there's different plots that you can really use and look at. 6 hourly precipitation, that's always good to kind of discern snowfall rates and precipitation rates. This year has been a warm one. As I said before, we've gotten a lot of rain. And so I'm particularly interested in looking at things like our wet bulb level that tells us, excuse me, wet bulb level that tells us basically where it's going to be cold enough to snow, or at what elevation it's going to be cold enough to snow at. Here at CSSL, we're at 6,500 or 6,900 feet, excuse me, which is roughly where this brown line is. So ideally, if we're going to get snow, we want our wet bulb level, or these little violin plots with the red crosses in them, to be below that line. And you can see that realistically speaking, they are below that line. So it's looking like this storm is going to be primarily snowfall. The other way that we can look at this is Sierra cement versus light and powdery snow, and snow to liquid ratio. So we have this plot over here on the right. Snow to liquid ratio tells us about how much snow we get for every inch of water, precipitable water in the air. So if we're going to get 1 inch of rain, how much does that equivalent? How much is the equivalent amount of snowfall that actually ends up falling? At the Snow Lab, our climatological average, or median, I should say, is about 9.6 inches for every 1 inch of precipitable water. This storm is coming in a little bit cooler, and that means that as we move forward in time, we get to Sunday, we could be seeing snow to liquid ratios of 12, 13, or even 14 to 1, which is more light and powdery than we're used to. So it could be a good ski day on Sunday. And then as we move on next week, still looking at around 11 to 12 cooler storm systems, which is really nice. Not having to worry about rain quite as much. Leading into next weekend, though, it does look like we could be a little bit on the warmer side, potentially more rain, but there's a lot more uncertainty in that, for one, because the forecast time is so far out into the future. All right, looking at the future, as far as our seasonal temperature outlooks and our seasonal precipitation outlooks, it has been a warm winter. We've seen several midwinter melt periods. We have seen a lot of rain, as I mentioned before. And it's not looking like we're going to buck that trend. It's looking like we're going to have equal chances of above average and below average temperatures from March through May. So kind of more of the same. And if we look down at the seasonal precipitation outlook for March through May, same there. We've been in this equal chances of both throughout the season. Unfortunately, the area where we have the driest conditions right now, Arizona, New Mexico, southern parts of Colorado and Utah, it looks like it's going to stay dry there. And we're going to have equal chances throughout that period. So again, it's looking more of the same. If we stay on average with what we would ordinarily see for precipitation and temperatures for the rest of the season, it'll be a good season. If we get average precipitation and warmer than average temperatures, we're probably going to see, still good, not ideal as far as fire danger. If we push even further into the future, that's when we start to see above average temperatures start to creep into Eastern California. So this is looking at April through June. which is our melt season up here after the snowpack has peaked. Right now, it's looking like we're going to have equal chances again at the lab. Eastern Sierra, far eastern California, probably going to be warmer than average. But at this point, it's anyone's guess as far as melt off times up here with our snowpack. Unfortunately, it does look like our precipitation will take a bit of a hit during that period, and we are slightly below average in terms of our April through June precipitation outlook. But realistically speaking, we want the bulk of our precipitation to fall before April anyway to set us up with a really nice snowpack. So that's not necessarily the end of the world. Okay, so that's the long and short of it, I guess, realistically. I think it's always cool to mention, as we look at these numbers for these snow courses, you think about the number of people it takes to do this every month. There's about 260 of these courses. Each course is measured on average by a team of 3 people. Which is just an incredible amount of folks, about 800 going out within the same weather window to get all these measurements done. And that's just here in California. Throughout the Western US, there are many, many more of these snow courses that are managed by the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And, there's thousands of us out here getting our measurements for the water supply. It's just remarkable to see. The last thing that I'll conclude with before I open things up for questions is again, I just want to harp on the fact that 3 decent seasons in a row, and I say decent because I don't know where we're going to end up with this season, whether we'll be at or above average or below average, but 3 decent seasons in a row is exceedingly rare in the Western U.S. Realistically, the last time we had a really solid number of wet seasons was at the beginning of the 2000s. There have been other other back-to-back seasons since then, but that's really the most memorable one that's happened before. So I think, some good perspective. We're a little drier than we'd like to be. It's not time for the alarm bells yet, and we should consider ourselves fortunate given the recent years. Yeah, so kind of a positive note to end on. And with that, I'll go ahead and open it to questions and let people unmute themselves. Once let me see here, I have to adjust that setting. But the other way we can do this too is if anybody wants to raise their hand, I'll go ahead and do that. Audio. Come on. Where are my settings? I was too good at setting up the meeting in order to make sure that people couldn't. There we go. There we go. Okay. Now, if you have a question, you can unmute yourself. All right. Wow. No questions. Easy peasy. Oh, Dick Simpson has a question. Dick, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think I just did.
Yeah, there you go.
Without being too specific, are you one of the groups that goes out and does snow courses? And if so, I was wondering roughly where your courses are. There used to be one in Castle Valley, but I don't know whether that's still active.
Yeah. There's that's a good question. Yeah, there's a few of the sites up here that are done. There's still one in Castle Valley. That course is currently done by the Department of Water Resources. They like to take their folks up there to get some training. We are actually in the process of applying for a permit to put some instrumentation out on the tower that's out there. It was the Snow Labs tower in the past, and there's nothing on it right now, but we'd like to re-instrument it with some research we're doing. So that's where one of the courses is. There's another course, the Donner Summit course, which is over next to their train tunnels. And that one is done by PG&E. And then we here at the Snow Lab do the Onion Creek course, which is back in the Onion Creek Experimental Forest at the North Fork of the American River. Our team, Megan Mason, and then Devin Eckberg from the Department of Water Resources went back and measured that one yesterday. They went ahead and used the opportunity of warm days and some good stable snowpack to head off the backside of Mount Lincoln after getting access from Sugar Bowl and did that measurement and came back out yesterday. It was they said it was a really good day to get that course measured. So yeah, we're here responsible for Onion Creek once a month, February through May every year. If it's a big year, we'll do it February through June. As far as the lab's contributions in the past, the lab used to do Castle Valley and I think Donner Summit as well, but those have been picked up by other agencies, and that's prior to my time. So I'm not exactly sure why those were picked up by the other agencies, but we work with those folks a lot. So if they want to do it, they're more than welcome to. All right. Any other questions?
This is Dave Antonucci.
Yeah,
This is Dave Antonucci. Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah.
Okay. I had a question. Could you talk a little bit more about that recent paper that talked about atmospheric rivers crashing the La Nina party and accounting for the wide variation in El Nino and La Nina?
Yeah, yeah. So that it was a paper released by the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes. I can never say that quickly. Um, Let me see if I can find it real quick. I'm going to go ahead and share my other screen while I search for it. But basically, it just says, oftentimes we have this kind of default idea of looking at El Nino or La Nina, and what that means for us here in California. And I can tell you, from a snow lab perspective, neither La Nina or El Nino helps us out a whole lot when we're looking at forecasting a season. Um, Primarily because uh, we're right in the gray area, right? We can really go either way and we're split almost exactly down the middle as far as our wettest years being El Nino or La Nina here at the lab, going back, to the 70s. So it doesn't typically mean much to us in the Central Sierra, but their paper discusses how much it actually means to California as a whole. And let me see if I can find that. Um, I know it's around here somewhere. There it is. Hearsay and ENSO teleconnections. Um, I'll share this screen again. Accept all cookies. There we go. Yeah, so this was published incredibly recently. Um, and really does a good job of looking at yeah, what our ENSO connections mean for us. Specifically, CW3 does a lot of work with atmospheric rivers. And so they discuss, how those atmospheric rivers do disrupt what we would expect out of our ENSO connections on the West Coast and the southwestern US. So I would encourage you to look it up. When I upload this to our YouTube channel, I'll put a link to this paper as well. But yeah, really, really fascinating stuff. And I think, this is something a lot of us know about. There's Mike Anderson, the state climatologist, and I talk about this occasionally. And, we can say in La Nina years, on average, this happens, or in El Nino years, on average, this happens. But California is the lands of extremes and not necessarily averages on a regular basis. So, as a paper that I think is pretty good at making that point as well. Any other questions? All right, I'll give it maybe another minute on here in case anything pops up that people want to talk about. Other than that, thanks for joining. I'll get this uploaded as soon as we hop off here, and have a good weekend. Thanks as always for your support of the Snow Lab.